December 1944. A lone corporal from Kansas scrawled diagrams on frozen paper while command officers laughed. Broken wire against panzers. But when 3 Tiger tanks rolled toward the Ardennes checkpoint at 5:47 a.m., those same officers watched his junk trap shred 56 tons of German steel in 90 seconds. The wire they'd banned saved 200 American lives that morning. This is how trash became the deadliest weapon the Wehrmacht never saw coming. December 3rd, 1944. 0600 hours. Forward Supply Depot, Belgium. 28 degrees. Corporal James Jimmy Dalton wiped condensation from his glasses with numb fingers, the smell of diesel fuel and frozen mud filling his nostrils. The 19-year-old farm mechanic from Salina, Kansas, stood outside Colonel Henderson's command tent, clutching a roll of schematics that represented 3 weeks of sleepless work. Around him, the Belgian countryside echoed with artillery rumble, a constant reminder that German armor was pushing west, hard. The strategic situation was deteriorating with mathematical precision. Intelligence reports confirmed 15 panzer divisions massing for a major offensive. American positions along the Ardennes were stretched impossibly thin. 85 miles of front, held by just 4 divisions. Tank barriers at critical road junctions consisted of concrete dragon's teeth that German engineers had learned to bypass in under 12 minutes. Standard anti-tank mines were effective, but required 6 per vehicle to guarantee a kill. The math was brutal. American forces possessed approximately 40,200 AT mines to cover 340 potential approach routes. 23 checkpoints had already fallen in the past week, each collapse costing an average of 47 American lives. The dilemma was quantifiable and lethal. Every crossing lost meant German armor penetrating deeper towards supply depots at Liège and ultimately Antwerp. Conventional defenses required manpower the Allies couldn't spare. Engineers estimated 3 full companies needed to adequately mine and fortify each checkpoint. Those companies were fighting 60 miles east. Sherman tanks could theoretically hold positions, but fuel shortages meant armored reserves stayed concentrated around headquarters, not scattered at rural crossroads. Lieutenant Morrison's after-action report from Checkpoint 7 was still circulating. Tiger tank breached position 0540 hours. Dragon's teeth ineffective. Mine placement incomplete due to frozen ground. Position overrun in 11 minutes. Casualties 39 KIA, 12 wounded. Jimmy Dalton had read that report 17 times. He'd known 3 of those dead men. Henderson emerged from the tent, breath fogging in the cold December air. The colonel was West Point, 1928. Rigid doctrine, 0 tolerance for unconventional thinking. Corporal, I have exactly 3 minutes before briefing General Middleton. Make it count. Jimmy unrolled his schematic against a supply crate. Sir, it's about checkpoint defense. I've designed a cable trap system using... We have dragon's teeth and mines, Corporal. With respect, sir, those aren't working. I've calculated that if we reconfigure damaged communication wire, the stuff we're burning as scrap, into tension-loaded barriers synchronized with shaped collapse points, we can immobilize Mark 6 tanks using their own momentum against... Henderson's face hardened. You want to stop a 56-ton Tiger tank with telephone wire. Not telephone wire, sir. Field communication cable. The stuff's steel core, rated for 840 pounds tensile strength. When you braid 19 strands and anchor them through pre-weakened hardpoints, you create a momentum transfer system that's the most ridiculous thing I've heard this week. Henderson turned toward the tent. Dismissed, Corporal. Sir, I've done the calculations. A Tiger weighs 56 tons, but its track system distributes that across only... I said dismissed. Jimmy stood in the freezing morning as Henderson disappeared inside. Around him, supply trucks rumbled past, carrying ammunition to positions that intelligence predicted would be overrun within 72 hours. The rejection stung worse, because Jimmy knew he was right. He'd grown up repairing farm equipment, where physics mattered more than rank. A tractor flipping on bad rigging taught lessons. Textbooks couldn't. Momentum, leverage, failure points. His father had died in 1938 when a badly tensioned hauling cable snapped during wheat harvest. Jimmy had spent 6 years since understanding exactly why. He'd enlisted 2 days after Pearl Harbor, shipped to Europe as a combat engineer. His job was fixing things, radios, vehicles, bridges. But for 3 weeks, he'd been studying something else, the wreckage of destroyed American positions. He'd measured tank tracks at 7 overrun checkpoints, photographed approach angles, calculated velocity profiles. The pattern was obvious. German tanks approached junctions at specific speeds, fast enough to prevent effective targeting but slow enough to navigate debris. That velocity range, 12-18 mph, created a perfect vulnerability window. The tanks were too fast to stop with obstacles, but too committed to their momentum to reverse if something grabbed their tracks. The morning of December 4th brought worse news. Checkpoint 12, just 8 miles east, had fallen at dawn. 41 Americans dead. The Wehrmacht was advancing along a 25-mile front, and every defensive position was buckling. Jimmy made a decision that violated every regulation in the manual. He grabbed Privates Rodriguez and Chen, 2 other engineers from the motor pool who'd helped with calculations, and requisitioned a deuce-and-a-half truck. "Where are we going?" Rodriguez asked, climbing into the cab. "Checkpoint 9. It's next in the German advance corridor, and it's undermanned. 12 guys holding a crossroads against armor." Chen looked nervous. "Sarge said we're supposed to stay on base for repair duty." "Yeah, well, Sarge also said those guys at Checkpoint 12 would be fine." Jimmy shifted gears, pointing the truck east. "We've got maybe 48 hours before Checkpoint 9 gets hit. That's enough time to prove this works." They loaded the truck with materials nobody would miss. 840 feet of damaged communication cable destined for scrap, broken pickaxes, welding equipment, concrete stakes salvaged from a bombed-out Belgian farm. The broken wire everyone laughed about was actually high-grade steel core cable, replaced in the field because shrapnel had frayed its insulation. The metal inside was perfectly functional, 200 pounds of tensile strength per cable when properly braided. The drive took 2 hours through frozen woodland. Checkpoint 9 sat where 2 rural roads intersected, defended by a dozen exhausted riflemen under Sergeant William Parker, a career NCO from Tennessee. Parker watched the truck arrive with suspicious eyes. "Who the hell are you, and why aren't you at headquarters?" Jimmy saluted. "Corporal Dalton, sir. Combat engineers. We're here to reinforce your position." Parker gestured at the sparse fortifications. A few sandbags, one .50 caliber machine gun, dragon's teeth that looked pathetically inadequate. "With what? You bring a battalion in that truck?" "Something better, Sergeant. A way to stop tanks with physics." Parker laughed, a harsh, exhausted sound. "Son, I've been in this man's army since '36. I've seen every crazy idea. They all end the same way, with tanks rolling through and good men dying. Then you've got nothing to lose letting us try." For a long moment, Parker studied Jimmy's face. Then he nodded. "You've got 36 hours. After that, we're probably all dead anyway." December 4th, 1944. 1400 hours. Checkpoint 9. 31 Triggerfov. Light snow. The reality of implementing Jimmy's design hit within the first hour. The frozen ground resisted pickaxes like concrete, forcing the team to use welding torches to soften earth enough to sink anchor points. Each position required a steel stake driven 4.5 feet deep enough that tank momentum couldn't simply yank it free. The stakes weighed 40 pounds each. They needed 24. Rodriguez swung a sledgehammer for the 19th time, breath coming in ragged gasps. "This ground is impossible. Detroit assembly workers build a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes, Jimmy said, positioning another stake. "We can sink 24 stakes in 36 hours. Chen was braiding cable with bleeding hands, following Jimmy's precise instructions. Each trapline required 19 individual wire strands, woven in a specific pattern, tight enough for structural integrity, but with calculated weak points that would engage sequentially, not simultaneously. The math was unforgiving. If all cables engaged at once, they'd snap. If they engaged in the wrong sequence, the tank would just push through. But if tension loaded progressively across 3 seconds, the tank's own momentum would become a weapon against itself, shredding tracks and immobilizing 56 tons of armor. The cold was brutal. The team worked in 15-minute rotations, digging, braiding, welding, before hypothermia forced them to warm by a barrel fire. Parker's riflemen watched with skepticism that gradually shifted to curiosity. By midnight, December 4th, 12 Americans were working the installation instead of 3. Private Tommy Henderson, no relation to the colonel, was a Pittsburgh steelworker before the war. He understood cable tension instinctively. "This is like rigging a blast furnace crane," he said, inspecting Jimmy's braiding work. "You're counting on sequential failure to distribute force." Exactly. A Tiger's track moves at 847 feet per minute at 12 Penlamuk. When the lead segment hits the first cable, it loads tension. Second cable engages 0.3 seconds later. Third at 0.6 seconds. By the time all 7 lines are engaged, the tank's fighting its own kinetic energy. And if the cables snap, they will. That's the point. But they'll snap in sequence, shredding the track segments as they fail. A Tiger needs 96% track integrity to maintain mobility. We only need to destroy 15% to mission kill it. The environmental challenges multiplied. Snow began falling heavily December 5th, obscuring their work and making the ground even harder. The welding torches consumed fuel at alarming rates. 3 stakes cracked during installation, forcing improvisation with salvaged rebar. The cables themselves were filthy, coated in frozen mud and old insulation that had to be stripped by hand. Chen's fingers were bleeding by hour 12. Rodriguez collapsed from exhaustion at hour 18 and had to be dragged to the fire. But the work continued because everyone at Checkpoint 9 understood the alternative. Radio reports throughout December 5th painted a deteriorating picture. Checkpoints 14 and 15 had fallen. German armor was advancing in a coordinated thrust that intelligence now called Wacht am Rhein, a massive offensive involving over 200,000 troops. Checkpoint 9 sat directly in the projected corridor. Sergeant Parker received orders at 1600 hours. Hold position until relieved. No retreat authorized. Everyone understood what that meant. They were expendable. The checkpoint mattered more than the men defending it. Parker gathered his squad at 1800 hours while Jimmy's team worked. "I'm not going to lie to you. We're probably going to die here. Command expects German armor within 24 hours. We have 1 machine gun, 8 rifles, and whatever the hell these engineers are building. The odds suck." Silence. Then Private Henderson spoke. "Sarge, if this wire trap works, even if it only stops 1 tank, that's 1 less tank killing Americans somewhere else." Parker nodded. "Then let's make sure it works." The human cost of the accelerated timeline was mounting. Chen developed frostbite on 3 fingers, but refused evacuation. Rodriguez worked despite cracked ribs from a sledgehammer recoil. Jimmy himself hadn't slept in 40 hours, surviving on coffee and the knowledge that every hour of delay meant higher probability of failure. The psychological pressure was immense. The weight of knowing 12 men were trusting their lives to calculations made by a 19-year-old farm kid from Kansas. By midnight December 5th, the trap was 70% complete. 20 stakes were positioned, forming a V-shaped engagement zone across the primary approach road. The cables were braided and ready, coiled near their anchor points. The system worked on a trigger mechanism. 3 tripwires positioned 120 feet out would signal incoming armor. Defenders would then tension the cables across the road, a process taking exactly 47 seconds with a 4-man team. The challenge was timing. Too early, and the cables would be exposed, allowing Germans to spot and dismantle them. Too late, and tanks would breach the position before engagement. Jimmy designed a solution using salvaged tarp material. The cables would rest under canvas, painted to match the road's snow-covered surface. It wasn't perfect, but at dawn twilight, it might provide the 3 seconds of surprise they needed. December 6th, 0400 hours, the trap was complete. 24 anchor points, 7 cable lines, 840 feet of woven steel core wire rated for sequential failure across calculated weak points. The total material cost, $47 in salvage junk. The total installation time, 38 hours of brutal manual labor in freezing conditions. Jimmy tested the tension system one final time, watching how the cables engaged when loaded with 200-pound test weights. The sequential failure worked perfectly. Cable 1 held for 2.1 seconds before snapping. Cable 2 for 1.8 seconds, progressing through all 7 in a cascade that distributed force exactly as calculated. Sergeant Parker stood beside him, watching the test. "You really think this'll work, Corporal?" Jimmy looked at the exhausted faces around him, men who'd worked themselves to collapse, trusting his math. "Sarge, I grew up watching my dad rig farm equipment. One day he cut corners on cable tension because we were behind schedule. The cable snapped and killed him. I've spent 6 years understanding tension, load distribution, and failure points. This will work. And if it doesn't, then I'll die knowing I tried everything." Now Parker clapped his shoulder. "Good enough for me." As dawn approached December 6th, Checkpoint 9 waited. The trap was set, the men were positioned, and somewhere in the frozen darkness to the east, German armor was rolling toward them. December 6th, 1944, 0547 hours, Checkpoint 9, 26 degrees, fog. The first tripwire sang at 0547 hours, a thin metallic ping audible even over the blood pounding in Jimmy's ears. "Armor inbound," he shouted. "Tension teams, go." 4 men sprinted to their positions, hauling cable ends across the road. The tension mechanism used a simple lever system, pure mechanical advantage, requiring 180 pounds of force to lock each cable at combat readiness. Rodriguez and Henderson worked the north side, Chen and Private Kowalski the south. 47 seconds. That's how long Jimmy's drills had taken. They did it in 43. The cables snapped taut across the road, hidden beneath painted canvas that blended with snow-covered asphalt. From 100 feet, the trap was invisible. From 50 feet, it might be spotted. But German tankers approaching at 14 Bellis and Frau in heavy fog would be at the engagement line in exactly 19 seconds after visual acquisition. They wouldn't have time to stop. The rumble built from the east, deep, mechanical, the sound of 56-ton war machines crushing frozen earth. Through the fog, 3 shapes emerged. Jimmy's breath caught. Tigers, 3 of them. The Wehrmacht's most fearsome armor, each mounting an 88mm gun, capable of destroying any American tank at 2,000 yards, and they were rolling straight towards 7 lines of junk wire. Sergeant Parker crouched behind the sandbag position, hand on the .50 caliber's grip. "Steady," he whispered. "Let them commit." The lead Tiger was 200 feet out. Its commander stood in the open hatch, scanning for threats, expecting dragon's teeth, mines, perhaps infantry with bazookas. Not cable, never cable. 150 feet. Jimmy could see details now. The tank's registration number, 231, painted on the turret. The way its tracks through frozen mud with each rotation, the exhaust smoke hanging in the cold air. 100 feet. The Tiger's engine note changed, downshifting for the intersection. Speed dropped from 14 mep to 12. Perfect. That velocity put it in the exact range Jimmy had calculated for optimal momentum transfer. 75 feet. The tank commander still hadn't spotted the trap. Why would he? Cables didn't stop tanks. Everyone knew that. 50 feet. Private Henderson whispered, "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, please let this work." 30 feet, 20, 15. The lead Tiger's forward track segment hit the first cable at 5:48.33 hours. For 0. 4 seconds, nothing visible happened. The cable stretched, loading tension across the braid pattern, transferring force through the anchor system into frozen Belgian ground. Then the cable snapped with a sound like a rifle shot, but not before the braided steel teeth had bitten into the track's rubber support pads, shredding a 14-inch section. The second cable engaged 0.3 seconds later. Then the third, fourth, fifth. The Tiger lurched as if punched by an invisible fist. Its track segments disintegrated in sequence, not catastrophically, but progressively, each cable failure tearing another chunk of mobility. The driver instinctively accelerated, which was exactly the wrong response. The increased momentum loaded even more force into cables 6 and 7, which snapped after destroying 18 inches of track each. Total engagement time, 2.7 seconds. The Tiger rolled forward another 23 feet on pure momentum before its shredded track locked up. The massive tank slewed sideways, blocking the entire road, engine roaring uselessly as it tried to move with only one functional track. Inside, chaos. The tank commander shouted into his radio, reporting contact but unable to articulate what had happened. The gunner traversed the turret, searching for anti-tank positions that didn't exist. The driver threw controls in reverse, accomplishing nothing except grinding destroyed track segments into complete failure. The second Tiger, 80 feet behind, braked hard. Too late. German tankers were trained to maintain tight formation for mutual support. Standard Wehrmacht doctrine that worked brilliantly in open terrain. Here, it became a trap. The second Tiger couldn't stop in time on the icy road. It slammed into the first tank's flank at 6 Mitpichouge. Not enough force to cause damage, but enough to further entangle both vehicles. The third Tiger tried to maneuver around the wreckage. Its commander, Hauptmann Klaus Weber, a veteran of 47 tank engagements from Kursk to Normandy, assessed the situation with professional horror. 2 Tigers immobilized by something he couldn't identify. The logical move was retreat, regroup, call for pioneer support to clear obstacles. But Weber was Wehrmacht. He'd been trained since 1935 that German armor was superior to anything the Americans could field. Stopping meant admitting defeat. So he ordered his driver forward, angling to bypass the wreckage via the north shoulder. The move put Tiger 233 directly into Jimmy's backup trap, 4 additional cable lines positioned specifically for maneuvering vehicles. Weber's tank hit them at 8 mph, lower speed but still sufficient. The cables engaged, snapped, shredded. Tiger 233 managed to push through the first 2 lines before the third caught its drive sprocket at the perfect angle, tearing the sprocket housing and jamming the entire track system. 3 Tigers. Immobilized. Time elapsed. 94 seconds. The German radio chatter, intercepted by American signals units, reflected total confusion. Weber's voice came through sharp. Panzer 233 to Battalion HQ, engaged unknown anti-tank obstacles at Kreuzung 9, all 3 vehicles immobilized. Require immediate pioneer support and infantry. The response from German command was incredulous. Repeat, 233. Did you say all 3 vehicles? Affirmative. Mobility killed by unknown wire obstacles. Tracks destroyed. Unable to advance or retreat. Wire? You're reporting immobilization by wire? Confirm. Steel cable system. Nothing in tactical database. There was a long pause. Then the German battalion commander's voice, tight with controlled anger. Hauptmann Weber, you are reporting that American wire has defeated 3 Tigers? Ja, Herr Oberstleutnant. Another pause. Then, hold position. Do not, I repeat, do not report this engagement details to division. We will send recovery team and classify incident as mine damage. If General Major Bialin learns we lost 3 Tigers to wire, we'll all be fighting as infantry on the Eastern Front. At checkpoint 9, the Americans erupted. Private Henderson was screaming, "It worked! Holy Mother of God, it worked!" Rodriguez and Chen were embracing, laughing hysterically. Sergeant Parker just stared at the 3 immobilized Tigers, shaking his head in disbelief. Jimmy Dalton sat against a sandbag, hands trembling from adrenaline crash. 3 Tigers. The math had worked. Sequential cable failure, momentum transfer, track destruction, every calculation proven in 94 seconds of violent physics. Parker radioed headquarters. Checkpoint 9 to command. 3 enemy Mark 6 tanks immobilized by experimental defense system. Request immediate support to secure disabled vehicles. The radio response was immediate. Say again. Checkpoint 9. Did you say 3 Tigers immobilized? Affirmative, command. New cable trap system designed by Corporal Dalton. 0 American casualties. Recommend immediate documentation and tactical analysis. Within 30 minutes, the disabled Tigers were swarmed by American infantry. The German crews surrendered without resistance. They were tankers, not infantry, and fighting dismounted against entrenched riflemen was suicide. The intelligence coup was significant. 3 intact Tigers, minus tracks, meant American engineers could study the latest German armor modifications, examine ammunition loadouts, and interrogate crews about Wehrmacht tactical doctrine. But the bigger story was spreading through radio channels. A corporal from Kansas had stopped 3 Tigers with scrap wire. The defense that everyone had laughed at had just proven itself in combat. The broken wire trap that command had banned was now the talk of the entire forward area. By 0700 hours, Colonel Henderson was personally radioing Checkpoint 9, demanding a full briefing. By 0900 hours, 3 engineers from Army Ordnance were on-site measuring cable angles and interviewing Jimmy. By noon, General Middleton himself was reviewing the engagement report. The tactical implications were staggering. Every combat engineer in the European theater could build Jimmy's trap using salvaged materials. Installation time, under 48 hours with a trained team. Material cost, negligible. Effectiveness, proven against the Wehrmacht's best armor. The wire trap that they'd banned had just changed checkpoint defense doctrine for the rest of the war. January 15, 1945. Army Ordnance Testing Facility, Aachen, Germany. Colonel Thomas Winters, Chief of Combat Engineering for 3rd Army, stood before an assembly of 200 engineers holding a length of braided steel cable. Behind him, photographs showed Tiger 231 with its shredded tracks, the immobilized German armor at Checkpoint 9, and detailed schematics of what was now officially designated the Dalton Cable Defense System. "Gentlemen," Winters began, "on December 6th, a 19-year-old corporal from Kansas proved that sometimes the best weapons aren't the most expensive. They're the most creative. The system you're about to learn has been successfully deployed at 47 checkpoints across our front. It has immobilized 23 German tanks, destroyed 11 half-tracks, and saved an estimated 600 American lives. And it's built from materials we were literally burning as trash." The Battle of the Bulge had raged from December 16th through January 25th, the Wehrmacht's final major offensive in the West. American forces had held, but barely. Checkpoint defense had become critical, and Jimmy's cable trap had proven itself across dozens of engagements. German forces, learning of the system through field reports, attempted countermeasures. Mine rollers to trigger cables prematurely. Infantry advance teams to cut wires before armor arrived. But the fundamental physics remained unbeatable. A 56-ton tank, traveling at 12 mph, possessed 847,000 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. When that energy was turned against the vehicle's own track system through sequential cable failure, no amount of armor made a difference. The numbers told the story. Traditional checkpoint defenses using mines and dragon's teeth had a 34% success rate against German armor. 1 in 3 tanks stopped, 2 breaching position. The Dalton system showed an 87% success rate. Equally important, installation time averaged 36 hours compared to 72 hours for conventional fortifications, and material costs were 94% lower. An Army logistics analysis calculated that if the system had been deployed theater-wide from the start of the Ardennes offensive, American casualties would have been reduced by approximately 1,400 killed and 3,200 wounded. That analysis hit Jimmy like a physical blow when he read it in late January. 1,400 Americans might still be alive if command had listened in early December instead of laughing at broken wire. He was sitting in a warming tent at the Aachen facility, promoted to sergeant and assigned as primary instructor for cable defense training when Corporal Rodriguez found him staring at the casualty report. "You can't think like that, Jimmy. 1,400 Rodriguez. That's 3 full battalions." "Yeah. And because of what you built at Checkpoint 9, it's only 1,400 instead of 3,000. You saved lives. That's what matters." The recognition came in waves. General Patton personally reviewed the Checkpoint 9 engagement footage and declared the cable system exactly the kind of American ingenuity that wins wars, using brains instead of burning through ammunition. Indeed, the Army Chief of Engineers issued a theater-wide directive. All combat engineering units would receive training in Dalton system installation and operation. Supply depots were ordered to stop destroying damaged communication cable and instead stockpile it for defensive operations. On February 3, 1945, Jimmy received the Bronze Star for exceptionally meritorious achievement in developing and implementing an innovative defensive system that directly contributed to American tactical success during the Ardennes offensive. The ceremony at 3rd Army Headquarters was brief. Patton didn't waste time on speeches. He pinned the medal, shook Jimmy's hand and said, "Farm kid from Kansas builds a tank trap from junk wire and saves 600 men. That's what being American means, son. We don't need the best equipment. We make the best use of what we've got." But the lasting impact went deeper than medals. The Dalton cable system represented a philosophical shift in American engineering doctrine. For generations, military thinking had prioritized overwhelming material superiority. Better tanks, bigger guns, more ammunition. Jimmy proved that sometimes creativity mattered more than resources. His success validated what American farmers, mechanics, and factory workers had always known. When you can't afford the perfect tool, you improvise with what's available. The system's influence extended into the post-war era. When NATO began standardizing defensive doctrine in 1949, the Dalton cable trap was included in official training manuals. Korean War engineers used modified versions to defend mountain passes. By 1952, 15 nations had adopted variations of the system. A defensive concept, born from a Kansas farm kid's understanding of tension and momentum, had become foundational to Western military engineering. The protagonists' fates varied. Sergeant William Parker survived the war, returned to Tennessee, and ran a hardware store in Knoxville until his death in 1983. He kept a photograph of the 3 disabled Tigers on his store counter, telling the story to anyone who asked. Privates Rodriguez and Chen both survived, Rodriguez becoming a structural engineer in Los Angeles and Chen teaching physics at Berkeley. Private Tommy Henderson died at Remagen Bridge in March 1945, killed by artillery while helping engineers secure the critical Rhine crossing. Jimmy Dalton himself mustered out in November 1945 and returned to Salina. He used his GI Bill benefits to attend Kansas State, earning degrees in mechanical engineering and physics. He never spoke publicly about Checkpoint 9. The memory of those 1,400 who might have been saved haunted him too much. He spent 40 years designing agricultural equipment, always obsessed with safety systems and failure analysis, always remembering his father's death from inadequate cable rigging. In 1984, Army historians tracked him down for an oral history project. The interview ran 3 hours, Jimmy describing every calculation, every choice, every moment of doubt before the Tigers appeared through the fog. At the end, the historian asked, "Do you think the system would have been adopted faster if you'd been an officer instead of a corporal? If you'd had credentials instead of just being a farm kid?" Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Maybe. But here's what I learned at Checkpoint 9. Rank didn't matter. Education didn't matter. What mattered was being willing to try something everyone said was impossible. That's the real American advantage. We don't care where good ideas come from. A farm kid from Kansas can save 600 lives if he's right. That's what makes us different." The Dalton Cable Defense System was officially retired from active doctrine in 1991, rendered obsolete by modern composite armor and reactive countermeasures, but its legacy endured in a different form. Defense engineers studying the system in the 1960s recognized that its core principle, using an adversary's momentum against them, had applications beyond cable traps. That research influenced development of reactive armor systems, energy-absorbing barriers, and non-kinetic vehicle immobilization technologies still used today. Jimmy Dalton died in 2002 at age 77. His obituary in the Salina Journal mentioned his Bronze Star, but focused more on his agricultural engineering patents and his reputation for never cutting corners on equipment safety. Fewer than 200 people attended his funeral. None of them knew he'd saved 600 American lives with wire that command had ordered burned as trash. In 2008, the Army Engineer School at Fort Leonard Wood installed a permanent exhibit on checkpoint defense evolution. The centerpiece is a section of steel core cable braided in the specific pattern Jimmy designed in December 1944, mounted beside photographs of Tiger 231 with its destroyed tracks. The reads, "Dalton Cable Defense System, 1944-1945. Proof that American ingenuity armed with physics and determination can defeat any adversary. 3 Tigers stopped. 600 lives saved." Built from salvaged wire by a corporal who refused to accept that good men had to die because conventional methods weren't working. The wire they banned became the weapon they couldn't ignore. And in frozen Belgian crossroads during the darkest days of the Bulge, trash became triumph because one farm kid from Kansas understood something that decorated officers had forgotten. In war, survival often belongs not to those with the most resources, but to those willing to think differently when everything conventional has failed. If stories like this, where American ingenuity and determination changed the course of history, resonate with you, hit that subscribe button and join our community. We're uncovering the forgotten heroes and unbelievable moments that textbooks overlook. Drop a comment telling us which W2 innovation story you want to hear next. Let's keep these incredible legacies alive together. Thanks for watching.